You know, Madison thought she was special too. Nathaniel Sterling's voice cuts through the ambient noise of McDonald's like a blade through silk. His tone carries the casual cruelty that only comes from years of practice. Right before she decided to take that jump. Everly Blackwood doesn't look up from her chicken nuggets. Table 12, red Happy Meal tray positioned exactly 8 inches from the edge. Receipt timestamp reading 3:47 p.m. 23 witnesses with phones scattered throughout the dining area, most pretending not to notice the 5 boys who've arranged themselves in perfect formation around her booth. Cameron Ridge leans closer, his psychology textbook knowledge weaponized into something far more dangerous. Same red hair, same quiet attitude. His smile never reaches his eyes. Weird how history repeats itself. The fluorescent light above flickers once. Everly finally raises her head, meeting Nathaniel's gaze with the kind of stillness that makes predators pause. Her voice carries no anger, no fear, just fact. Madison didn't jump. She was pushed. She takes another bite of her nugget, chewing thoughtfully. And whoever did it is about to pay. The silence that follows is absolute. Even the play place kids seem to sense something shifting in the adult world beyond their plastic tunnels. I'm building a community of people who care about justice and truth in education. If you believe students deserve protection from violence, hit like to show we're not alone in this fight. Subscribe for more stories about courage and positive change, because your support through the thanks button helps me keep shining light on these critical issues. What happens next will completely change how you see quiet strength. 15 minutes earlier, Everly had entered this McDonald's the way she entered every space, with military precision disguised as teenage awkwardness. 3 exits mapped in 4 seconds: main entrance, emergency door by the play place, staff entrance past the restrooms. She'd ordered using exact change, no credit card trail, no digital footprint beyond what she wanted to leave. The modest apartment she'd moved into last week told a story of financial struggle. The truth was more complicated. St. Catherine's Academy had been her cover for 18 months, the perfect breeding ground for a certain type of predator. Her transcript showed academic excellence marred by a mysterious incident involving her best friend's tragic death, a narrative carefully constructed to attract exactly the kind of attention now surrounding her. Everly adjusts her position slightly, maintaining clear sightlines to all approaches while appearing to focus on her homework. Jefferson High's reputation for chaos makes it the perfect hunting ground for what the federal task force has designated as organized educational racketeering. The kind of systematic abuse that requires institutional protection and generational wealth to sustain. Her phone buzzes once, a text from her supposed mother asking about dinner plans. In reality, it's Agent Martinez confirming the recording equipment embedded in her backpack is functioning at optimal levels. Every word spoken in the last 3 minutes has been transmitted live to a federal surveillance team positioned 2 blocks away. Nathaniel Sterling represents 4th-generation wealth and 3rd-generation corruption. At 17, he already carries himself with the entitled confidence of someone who's never faced real consequences. His father owns controlling interests in half the school board, his mother chairs the PTA, and his academic record reflects the kind of perfection that comes from having the right last name rather than actual achievement. But Nathaniel's true power doesn't come from his family connections. It comes from his role as regional coordinator for something much larger and more dangerous. The Federation operates like organized crime adapted for the educational system, with tentacles reaching into 12 high schools across 3 counties. Their methods are sophisticated: financial incentives for compliance, social isolation for resistance, and, when necessary, The kind of accidents that leave grieving families too broken to ask difficult questions. Garrett Stone stands to Nathaniel's left. 220 pounds of carefully controlled violence. As the linebacker who knows exactly how much force leaves no permanent marks, he serves as the Federation's primary enforcement tool. His methods are precise, clinical, a dislocated shoulder disguised as a sports injury, bruised ribs explained by an unfortunate fall down the stairs. Hunter Brooks handles digital warfare from behind his laptop screen. Social media narratives can be destroyed within hours when Hunter sets his mind to it. Photoshopped images suggesting eating disorders, academic cheating, or social isolation spread through carefully cultivated networks of fake accounts until reality becomes irrelevant. Cameron Ridge specializes in psychological pressure points. His understanding of teenage vulnerability comes from genuine study. He's read every textbook on adolescent psychology, not to help but to exploit. He finds the exact words that break spirits, the precise emotional leverage that turns strong kids into compliant victims. Austin Gray serves as the silent observer, taking notes on reactions and reporting back to handlers who coordinate Federation activities across the region. His quiet demeanor masks a calculating intelligence that catalogs weaknesses for future exploitation. Together, they've compiled a perfect record: 847 successful conversations, 0 official complaints, 23 forced transfers, and complete protection from institutional consequences. Until now. Let's start with the welcome package, Nathaniel says, sliding into the booth across from Everly with practiced ease. His voice carries the smooth confidence of a politician in training. $500 cash, just for agreeing to hear us out. No strings attached. He places a thick envelope on the table, positioning it carefully next to her Happy Meal tray. Plus, guaranteed A's in 3 classes of your choice, invitations to the right parties, and protection from the kind of accidents that seem to happen to students who don't fit in. Everly continues eating methodically, treating his words like background noise. She doesn't acknowledge the money, doesn't break eye contact, doesn't show any of the reactions he's accustomed to seeing. Her complete indifference to his offer creates the first crack in Nathaniel's confidence. "We know about your situation at St. Catherine's," he continues, his tone shifting to false sympathy. "Family scandal, the unfortunate incident with your friend Madison. Starting over can't be easy, especially when people might discover what really happened that night." Hunter opens his laptop, screen angled so Everly can see carefully doctored photographs, images that suggest she was present during Madison's final moments, that she failed to prevent a suicide she could have stopped. "Digital footprints are funny things," he says quietly. "They can tell whatever story we want them to tell." "Tuition assistance up to $2,000, Cameron adds, his psychology training evident in how he structures the escalating offers. Designer clothes budget, weekly allowance for cooperation. All you have to do is understand that Jefferson High has certain traditions." For the first time since they sat down, Everly speaks. Her question is precise, technical, and shouldn't be something a transfer student would know to ask. "When you say traditions, are you referring to the Federation's regional compliance protocols, or just the local intimidation structures?" The envelope in Nathaniel's hand trembles almost imperceptibly. His confident smile falters for exactly 1.3 seconds before he recovers. But that momentary crack reveals something that shouldn't exist: uncertainty in the presence of someone who should be powerless. The isolation campaign begins subtly. When Everly arrives for lunch the next day, every table in the cafeteria is mysteriously full. Lab partners have already been assigned in chemistry class before she can introduce herself. Study groups are accidentally scheduled during her free periods, with apologetic shrugs from organizers who claim they forgot to check the calendar. Hunter's digital warfare proves more sophisticated. Fake social media accounts begin posting exclusive photographs from St. Catherine's Academy, showing Everly isolated from her classmates, sitting alone during lunch, walking by herself between classes. The images are real, but carefully curated to suggest social problems rather than the deliberate tactical positioning they actually represent. Anonymous comments appear under school forum posts. Rich girl slumming with the locals. Heard her family's involved in some kind of scandal. Violence problems at her old school, that's why she had to transfer. The rumors spread with the viral efficiency that only teenage social networks can achieve. Within 48 hours, Everly's reputation has been systematically demolished by whispers designed to sound like concerned warnings from students who care about their classmates' safety. Grace Miller watches this campaign unfold from her position near the guidance counselor's office. As a witness to the original McDonald's confrontation, she recognizes the pattern. She's seen 3 other transfer students receive the same treatment over the past 2 years. Each time, the new student either capitulated to Federation demands or transferred out within weeks, broken by the relentless social pressure. But Everly's response defies every precedent. Instead of withdrawing or seeking protection, she begins her own investigation. Using techniques that shouldn't be available to a 17-year-old girl, she reverse engineers Hunter's IP tracking protocols and leaves evidence of her own digital skills embedded in his personal laptop. A message that only becomes apparent when he runs his next vulnerability scan. The message is simple, elegant, and terrifying in its implications. I know what you did last summer, and last winter, and every semester before that. By the 3rd week, the gloves come off entirely. Cameron corners Everly in library study room C7, his usual weapon, psychological manipulation, sharpened to its deadliest edge. I've been thinking about Madison, he says, settling into the chair across from her with predatory patience. Specifically, about what drove her to that bridge at 2:37 a.m. on March 15th. The exact details aren't in any official report, but we have sources. He produces a folder containing photographs that shouldn't exist. Security camera stills from the bridge, time-stamped images showing Madison's final moments, documentation of a suicide that was never investigated because the right people ensured it never would be. Similar intervention, Cameron continues, his voice clinical in its detachment. Same psychological pressure points, same systematic isolation. Amazing how these tragic coincidences keep happening to students who don't understand the importance of community cooperation. Everly's hands remain steady as she turns the page of her chemistry textbook. Her voice, when she finally speaks, carries no emotion whatsoever. You just confirmed what I already knew. Now I have exactly what I need. Cameron's confident expression shifts to confusion, then something approaching alarm. What are you talking about? Outside the study room window, Garrett demonstrates the Federation's physical intimidation techniques on a sophomore who made the mistake of sitting at the wrong lunch table. His methods are precise, a hand placed just so on the shoulder, pressure applied to nerve clusters that create pain without leaving marks, body positioning that blocks the victim's escape routes while appearing casual to any adult observers. 12 students witness this demonstration. All 12 find urgent business elsewhere the moment it begins. 3 teachers notice the interaction. All 3 suddenly remember important tasks that require their immediate attention in other parts of the building. The security camera mounted above the scene suffers a convenient malfunction that will mysteriously resolve itself once the incident concludes. This is how institutional protection operates, not through grand conspiracy, but through the accumulated weight of individuals choosing not to see, not to act, not to risk their own comfort for someone else's safety. But Everly has been watching, recording, documenting every detail with equipment that transforms this calculated cruelty into federal evidence. When Garrett repositions his victim's arm to maximize pain while minimizing visibility, he doesn't realize that Everly has subtly guided his movement, ensuring optimal camera angles for the devices she's positioned throughout the school. "The recording started the moment you mentioned Madison's name in McDonald's," Everly says quietly, her words causing Cameron's face to drain of color. "Everything since then, the bribes, the threats, the systematic harassment campaign, it's all been transmitted live to federal agents who've been building a case against the Federation for 8 months." She closes her chemistry textbook with deliberate precision. "The device in my backpack isn't just recording audio. It's capturing metadata from every phone in range, mapping the social networks you use to spread rumors, tracking the digital fingerprints Hunter leaves when he manipulates online content." Cameron stares at her in growing horror as the implications become clear. Every carefully planned move, every strategic pressure point, every demonstration of institutional power has been documented by someone who understood exactly what they were doing from the moment she walked into Jefferson High. "Madison's suicide was staged with federal help," Everly continues, her voice remaining steady even as she delivers information that reframes everything Cameron thought he knew. "She's alive, in witness protection, feeding information to a task force that specializes in organized corruption within educational systems." The folder of photographs trembles in Cameron's hands as he realizes they're not evidence of the Federation's power. They're proof of their crimes, obtained by someone who's been systematically documenting their activities for federal prosecution. 12 other schools are receiving similar interventions right now, Everly says, standing to leave. "Students like me, placed strategically to expose networks like yours." The Federation isn't just facing investigation at Jefferson High, it's facing systematic dismantlement across 3 states. She pauses at the door, turning back with something that might be pity. "You should probably call your parents. Ask them to recommend a good criminal defense attorney. You're going to need one." The silence in study room C7 stretches for long seconds after Everly's departure. Cameron sits frozen, staring at the folder of photographs that he now understands represents not power, but evidence in a federal case that will destroy everything the Federation has built. His phone buzzes with an incoming text from Nathaniel. "Emergency meeting. Conference room B now." As Cameron stumbles toward the door, his mind races through every conversation, every threat, every carefully calculated psychological manipulation he's deployed over the past 3 weeks. All of it recorded, all of it transmitted, all of it becoming part of a case file that will ensure his entire future disappears behind federal prison walls. The Federation has never lost a recruitment campaign. They've never faced real opposition. They've never encountered someone who understood their methods well enough to turn those methods against them. Until now. Conference Room B has never hosted a meeting like this one. Nathaniel Sterling sits at the head of the polished oak table, his usual commanding presence fractured by the weight of revelations that threaten to destroy everything his family has built over 3 generations. Hunter's laptop screen glows with federal case file excerpts that should be classified. Cameron clutches printed transcripts of conversations he thought were private. Garrett stares at photographs documenting his enforcement techniques with the kind of detail that only comes from professional surveillance. Austin Gray, the quiet observer who's spent 2 years cataloging weaknesses for Federation exploitation, now finds himself studying his own psychological profile, compiled by federal analysts who've been watching him watch others. His methods, his patterns, his carefully hidden moral doubts about the organization he serves. Everything laid bare in clinical detail. How long? Nathaniel's voice carries none of its usual authority. The question hangs in the air like smoke from a house fire. Inevitable, choking, impossible to ignore. Hunter's fingers shake as he scrolls through metadata that maps their entire digital network. Based on the sophistication of the surveillance equipment, the depth of the psychological profiles, the coordination with other regional operations. He pauses, swallowing hard. Minimum 18 months, possibly longer. Everything, Cameron whispers. His psychology training finally turned against him as he recognizes the signs of systematic psychological warfare. Every conversation, every threat, every student we've broken. They have everything. Nathaniel stands slowly, walking to the window that overlooks Jefferson High's courtyard. Below, students move between classes in patterns that seem random but follow invisible social hierarchies the Federation has spent years establishing. Territory marked by fear. Compliance purchased through systematic cruelty. Power maintained through institutional silence. All of it about to crumble. My father built this network to prepare us for the real world, Nathaniel says quietly. Corporate boardrooms, political backrooms, places where power determines truth, and weakness gets devoured. His reflection in the glass looks older than 17, worn down by the weight of inherited corruption. The Federation isn't just about schools. We're training for adult hierarchies where these same methods determine who succeeds and who disappears. He turns back to face his lieutenants, and for the first time, they see past the polished facade to the desperate sun underneath. But if we're facing federal prosecution, if everything we've built is being dismantled, his voice trails off as the implications sink in. My father will view this as a failure that reflects on family legacy, and failures in our family don't get second chances. The emergency meeting runs 15 minutes longer than planned. When it finally ends, the 5 boys who've controlled Jefferson High for 2 years walk through the hallways like condemned men. Their usual territorial confidence has been replaced by the hollow-eyed awareness that their victims now know exactly how much power they never really had. Everly observes their dissolution from her position near the chemistry lab, making notes that will become part of the federal case file documenting institutional response to systematic pressure. Her phone buzzes with the customized message she's been waiting for, a text that appears to be from her study group but actually signals that Phase 2 of Operation Lunchroom is ready to commence. 24 hours after Cameron's confession in the library, the Federation's leadership decides to make one final play. If they're facing federal prosecution anyway, if their entire network is about to be exposed, then they'll go down fighting. The kind of public demonstration that either reestablishes their dominance or destroys them completely. They choose McDonald's for the confrontation because it's public enough to send a message, familiar enough to feel like home territory, and commercial enough that adult intervention seems unlikely. What they don't realize is that Everly chose this location 18 months ago, when the operation was first conceived. Every table position mapped for optimal surveillance angles, every security camera supplemented with federal recording equipment, every potential witness identified and psychologically profiled to predict their responses to violence. The McDonald's on Riverside Drive has been transformed into the perfect arena for documenting organized educational racketeering in action. 3:47 p.m., exactly 1 week after their first encounter. Everly sits at table 12 with the same red Happy Meal tray, the same methodical approach to her chicken nuggets, the same tactical positioning that offers clear sightlines to all exits. But today, the 23 witnesses scattered throughout the dining area include federal agents disguised as parents, teenagers, and fast food employees. The recording equipment embedded in her backpack has been supplemented with devices positioned throughout the restaurant. Every word, every gesture, every demonstration of Federation power will be captured from multiple angles in courtroom-quality resolution. Nathaniel approaches first, his usual confidence replaced by the desperate energy of someone with nothing left to lose. Behind him, Garrett cracks his knuckles with practiced intimidation. Hunter clutches his laptop like a digital weapon. Cameron rehearses psychological pressure points that have broken dozens of previous victims. Austin watches everything with the careful attention of someone documenting what might be his final assignment. "You think you're clever," Nathaniel says, sliding into the booth with movements that lack his usual smooth precision. "Recording our conversations, building your little federal case, playing the innocent victim while you destroy everything we've built." He signals with a subtle hand gesture. The 5-point formation surrounds Everly's table with military precision. Escape routes blocked, intimidation angles optimized, physical dominance established through careful positioning that appears casual to uninformed observers. "But here's what you don't understand about real power," Nathaniel continues, his voice carrying the edge of someone who's inherited institutional violence. Federal cases require living witnesses. Evidence needs people willing to testify. And sometimes, accidents happen to people who threaten the wrong families. The restaurant's ambient noise, children playing in the play place, fryer alarms beeping, cash registers processing orders, continues unchanged. But the energy around Table 12 shifts dramatically as the Federation prepares to demonstrate why their network has remained untouchable for 3 generations. "The problem with your investigation," Garrett says, reaching toward Everly's shoulder with confident deliberation, "is that it assumes we're just students playing games. But our methods come from places where lives actually depend on maintaining discipline." His grip technique, refined through 2 years of systematically applied violence, represents institutional knowledge passed down through family connections to corporate security, military contracting, and private corrections. The kind of precision that creates compliance without leaving evidence, pain without permanent damage, submission without successful prosecution. But as his hand closes around Everly's shoulder, she makes a slight adjustment to her seating position that transforms his confident grip into a leverage point. The red Happy Meal tray, positioned exactly 8 inches from the table edge, becomes a fulcrum that redirects Garrett's momentum against his own body weight. 15:56 and 14 seconds. Nathaniel signals the coordinated approach. 15:56 and 18 seconds. Garrett reaches for physical control. 15:56 and 19 seconds. Everly's Happy Meal tray leverages his overextended arm into a physics problem he never studied. 15:56 and 20 seconds. Hunter's phone becomes a projectile as the leverage sequence creates unexpected force vectors. 15:56 and 21 seconds. Cameron trips over the chair. Everly moved 18 inches during her earlier positional adjustment. Nathaniel stumbles backward as psychological shock meets physical overcompensation. 15:56 and 22 seconds. All 5 Federation leaders sprawl across McDonald's floor in various states of surprise and pain while Everly finishes her last chicken nugget. The 8-second sequence unfolds with the kind of precise choreography that only comes from months of planning, federal training, and complete understanding of how institutional bullies think they control physical space. Every movement calculated, every consequence anticipated, every reaction documented by surveillance equipment that transforms adolescent violence into federal evidence. The crowd reaction follows predictable patterns. 23 witnesses with phones capture everything from multiple angles, but none intervene until the conflict resolves itself. The same institutional paralysis that enables systematic abuse also prevents effective response to its disruption. Everly never stands up during the entire confrontation. Her Happy Meal toys remain untouched in their packaging throughout the violence. Nathaniel's student body president campaign button falls off during his stumble and lands in a pool of ketchup, a detail that will become symbolic of institutional authority's messy collapse. When you've witnessed someone expose a corruption network that's destroyed dozens of lives, how do you process what that means for your own community? Share your thoughts about institutional silence in the comments, because what happens next will determine whether these changes can spread beyond Jefferson High. The consequences unfold with federal efficiency. Within 6 hours of the McDonald's incident, simultaneous arrests occur across 3 states as Operation Lunchroom reaches its coordinated conclusion. 43 Federation members taken into custody at 12 high schools. 7 teachers terminated for institutional complicity. 2 principals arrested for racketeering conspiracy. School board resignations cascade through suburban districts that pride themselves on educational excellence. Garrett Stone's sprained wrist from his own overextension becomes evidence of systematic violence training. Hunter Brooks's black eye from his own phone trajectory leads investigators to encrypted communications networks used for coordinating digital harassment campaigns. Cameron Ridge's bruised ego transforms into psychological profiles, documenting the calculated cruelty required for institutional abuse. Nathaniel Sterling's ruined reputation opens family financial records that reveal how generational wealth purchases educational immunity. The numbers tell their own story. 847 previous victims identified through recovered documentation. $2.5 million in settlement funds established for psychological counseling and educational support. 15 policy changes implemented across the district to prevent systematic abuse from reestablishing itself. FBI case number 2024-EDU-7439 becomes a model for federal intervention in educational racketeering. Task Force Riverside expands into a national program targeting institutional corruption that hides behind academic respectability. Channel 7 News runs exclusive coverage based on documentation provided by federal sources. The Federation Files podcast series reaches number 3 on educational reform charts. A Congressional Education Committee schedules hearings on systematic abuse within American public schools. Financial corruption investigations trace $847,000 in consulting fees to shell companies owned by school board members' families. Luxury cars get repossessed. Properties face federal seizure. Swiss bank accounts become evidence in money laundering prosecutions. But even as justice unfolds around her, Everly maintains her cover with disciplined precision. She returns to her homework at the same McDonald's table, orders a second apple pie, completes her English essay on symbolism in contemporary literature. When local news reporters ask for interviews, she politely declines and refers them to the FBI's Public Information Office. The chemistry exam she's been preparing for throughout the investigation, she aces it the next morning, maintaining her academic focus despite orchestrating the largest educational corruption bust in federal history. Her transfer student persona remains intact. Her tactical background stays classified. Her federal training continues to appear like nothing more than unusual composure under pressure. Grace Miller approaches during lunch 2 days after the arrests, sliding into the seat across from Everly, with the careful hesitation of someone who's watched institutional power collapse overnight. "I saw what you did," she says quietly. "Not just the McDonald's thing. Everything. The way you documented their methods, turned their own techniques against them, got them to confess on federal recordings." Everly looks up from her sandwich, expression carefully neutral. "I don't know what you mean." I'm just a transfer student trying to finish high school. Students don't carry federal surveillance equipment, Grace says softly. They don't know criminal psychology well enough to manipulate trained manipulators. They don't have the kind of tactical awareness that maps exits and plans leverage points weeks in advance. The dining hall around them buzzes with conversation about the overnight transformation of their school's power structure. Federation territories have dissolved. Systematic harassment campaigns have ended. Teachers actually respond to bullying reports instead of finding urgent business elsewhere. My brother was one of their victims last year, Grace continues. Forced transfer, psychological breakdown, 6 months of therapy to deal with what they did to him. When I saw you arrive, saw how they targeted you, I thought you'd be just another casualty. She pauses, studying Everly's face for signs of the federal training that must lurk beneath her teenager disguise. But you weren't a victim. You were something else entirely. Everly's phone buzzes with an incoming message that appears to be from her study group, but carries coded instructions for Phase 3 of a much larger operation. Roosevelt High School, 15 miles across town, has reported unusual pattern disruptions in their own institutional hierarchy. Students asking unexpected questions, teachers receiving anonymous tips about systematic abuse, parents demanding investigations into previously untouchable family networks. The Federation's regional structure extends far beyond Jefferson High, and its dismantlement requires coordinated intervention at every node in the network. Everly's assignment here has reached successful completion, but her mission continues at the next target school. I have to transfer again, she tells Grace quietly. Academic opportunities at Roosevelt that better match my interests. It's not entirely a lie. Roosevelt does offer advanced placement courses in criminal justice, and her federal handlers have identified systematic abuse patterns there that require her particular skill set. But the truth behind her departure involves encrypted communications, federal transport protocols, and identity documentation that transforms Everly Blackwood into whatever cover identity Operation Lunchroom requires next. The recording equipment, the tactical planning, the psychological profiles. That's all federal training, isn't it? Grace asks. Everly stands to leave, gathering her books with the same careful precision she's maintained throughout her Jefferson High assignment. Some things are better left classified, but if you want to help prevent this from happening to other students, talk to Agent Martinez in the white sedan parked across from the main entrance. She's recruiting witnesses for the congressional hearings. She pauses, turning back with something that might be genuine friendship beneath her operational facade. And Grace? What happened to your brother matters. Federal prosecutors are building individual cases for every victim they can identify. His experience could help put these people away for decades. That evening, as Everly packs the modest belongings that represent her Jefferson High cover identity, her secure phone rings with the tone reserved for Priority Alpha Communications. The caller identification shows a number she hasn't seen for 6 months, a number that shouldn't exist if the federal death simulation had been as thorough as she believed. Hello, Everly. The voice carries familiar warmth, tinged with exhaustion, that speaks to 18 months of witness protection and psychological preparation. I think it's time we talked. Madison Wells, supposedly dead, officially non-existent, actually the primary intelligence asset whose information made Operation Lunchroom possible, speaks from a secure location that federal marshals have spent 2 years preparing for this moment. The Roosevelt High assignment isn't just another Federation node, Madison continues. Our intelligence suggests they're the regional headquarters, the place where institutional abuse techniques get refined before distribution to subsidiary schools. If we can document their training protocols, their communication networks, their financial structures, She pauses, and Everly can hear the weight of psychological trauma that federal protection can't entirely heal. We can prove that this isn't just teenage bullying. It's systematic preparation for adult institutional violence, funded by corporate interests that profit from social compliance and psychological submission. The implications stretch far beyond educational corruption into areas that require congressional investigation, federal task force expansion, and systematic reform of how American institutions handle embedded abuse networks. Project Sanctuary, Madison says quietly. 12 students like us, placed strategically across the Federation's territory, each assigned to specific nodes in their network. Some are gathering intelligence on administrative complicity, others are documenting financial corruption. A few are mapping communication protocols that connect educational abuse to larger institutional frameworks. Everly sets down the chemistry textbook she's been carrying throughout her Jefferson High assignment. No longer needed for cover, but containing margin notes that represent months of investigation into systematic cruelty disguised as academic excellence. How many other schools? She asks. 47 confirmed sites across 3 states, with expansion suspected into 2 additional regions. Corporate funding traceable to private prison contractors, pharmaceutical research into compliance psychology, and political organizations that profit from systematic social submission. The scope reaches far beyond anything Everly imagined when she accepted the Jefferson High assignment. Not just criminal prosecution of individual abusers, but federal investigation into institutional frameworks that transform educational settings into training grounds for adult authoritarianism. Madison's voice carries new strength as she outlines the expanded mission parameters. The Roosevelt assignment isn't just about documenting abuse. It's about understanding how these networks recruit, train, and deploy systematic cruelty across multiple institutional settings. Corporate research facilities, political training programs, private security companies that specialize in legal intimidation. She pauses, and Everly hears background voices that suggest Madison isn't calling from standard witness protection housing. I've been working with federal analysts to map the complete network structure. What we discovered goes far beyond educational corruption into areas that threaten democratic institutional frameworks. The secure line crackles with encryption static as Madison transmits case file summaries that require Everly's specialized security clearance to access. Images, financial records, psychological profiles that document how Federation training methods connect to adult institutional violence in corporate, political, and military contexts. Project Sanctuary represents the largest federal investigation into institutional abuse networks since the organized crime prosecutions of the 1970s, Madison continues. But instead of traditional criminal enterprises, we're targeting systematic psychological warfare embedded within legitimate educational frameworks. Everly studies the transmitted documents on her secure tablet, recognizing patterns that extend her understanding of the Jefferson High assignment far beyond local criminal prosecution. The Federation represents just one node in a network that spans educational, corporate, and political institutions, all designed to identify, recruit, and train individuals who can apply systematic cruelty within legal frameworks. Roosevelt High is their regional training center, Madison explains, the place where successful local operators like Nathaniel Sterling get advanced instruction in corporate intimidation, political manipulation, and legal coercion techniques that they'll use throughout their adult careers. The revelation reframes everything Everly thought she understood about her mission parameters. Not just stopping teenage bullying, but preventing the systematic creation of adults who will deploy institutional cruelty throughout American society. Are you ready for an assignment that could change how federal law enforcement approaches embedded institutional abuse? Madison asks. Everly looks around the modest apartment that's housed her Jefferson High cover identity, thinking about Grace Miller's brother and 46 other students whose lives were systematically destroyed by an organization that views psychological torture as educational preparation for adult success. "Roosevelt High," she says quietly. "When do I start?" 2 days later, a federal transport van, disguised as a family moving truck, deposits Everly at a new address across town. Her cover identity shifts from Everly Blackwood, transfer student with academic problems, to Everly Mason, orphaned niece of local relatives who've agreed to foster her through senior year. The backstory includes family tragedy that explains her quiet demeanor, academic excellence that masks tactical training, and social awkwardness that disguises surveillance techniques refined through 18 months of federal preparation. Roosevelt High's admission office processes her paperwork with bureaucratic efficiency, never suspecting they're enrolling a federal operative whose mission could destroy their institution's foundational power structures. Her first day includes the same tactical assessment she performed at Jefferson High. 3 exits mapped in 4 seconds. Territorial hierarchies identified through observation of student behavior. Institutional protection networks cataloged through administrative response patterns to minor conflicts. But Roosevelt High operates on a different scale entirely. Where Jefferson High's Federation cell controlled local territory through intimidation and financial incentives, Roosevelt serves as a regional training facility where successful operators receive advanced instruction in systematic institutional abuse. The students here don't just bully classmates, they practice techniques they'll deploy as corporate executives, political operatives, and legal professionals who understand how to apply calculated cruelty within acceptable social frameworks. Their methods represent graduate-level instruction in psychological warfare, disguised as academic preparation for leadership positions. Everly's secure phone buzzes with an incoming message. "Roosevelt team identified. Contact protocols attached." Madison says hello from Federal Analysis Center. Operation Sanctuary, Phase 2, commences tomorrow. She deletes the message using encryption protocols that leave no digital footprint, then opens her Roosevelt High chemistry textbook to begin preparing for an assignment that will determine whether federal law enforcement can successfully prosecute institutional abuse networks that span multiple states and organizational frameworks. The margin notes she makes tonight will become evidence in congressional hearings that reshape how American institutions handle embedded systematic cruelty. But first, she has to survive enrollment at a school that trains the next generation of legal predators. Through her dormitory window, Roosevelt High's campus glows under security lighting that illuminates pathways between buildings where tomorrow's corporate executives, political leaders, and institutional administrators are learning techniques that will determine the psychological safety of millions of American workers, voters, and citizens. The Federation was just the beginning. Federal investigation into institutional abuse networks continues. Everly Mason's enrollment at Roosevelt High marks the beginning of Operation Sanctuary Phase 2, where the true scope of systematic educational corruption threatens the foundational structures of American democratic institutions.